Εξομολογήστε το Κύριο ότι αγαθός, αλληλούια.
Ότι στον αιώνα το έλεος αυτού, αλληλούια.
Okay, who are the Yeah, but who are they?
I believe they were the Nasara.
Okay, so the Quran says in Surah Al-Ma'idah Ayah 5 that it's permissible for a Muslim man to marry a Christian and Jewish woman, right?
Yeah.
In Surah 9:29 it talks about the permissibility of to make war against them until you establish a jizya and they feel themselves subdued. That all of Islamic scholars interpret that to be Christians and Jews like me.
Like, yeah, I don't agree with that.
So that's what I mean.
But we know, you read Ahmed Jalal, you read. So traditional Muslim narrative is there was 360 idols and Arabia was full of pagan worship. We know that's not the case.
I don't think that's, I agree
We know
with that.
there were Christian communities. The question is, which Christian communities, which Jewish communities?
But you know what?
I posit that it was the original Christian community.
First of all, there's no evidence for this, which is problematic,
there
right?
There is.
Show me, where's this Islamically compatible original Christian and Jewish group?
Okay, so we'd have to go through the history of, so those who know, Jesus had a message, peace be and blessed be. Jesus was a Jew. The leader of the Jerusalem church, agree with me, was James the Just,
Sure.
who we say is the brother of the Lord, yeah? James had a family, there was Simeon, there was many others. The Spontanai, who were the family of the Lord, they ran the churches. There was Pauline Christianity, and they were the bishops of many of the Eastern churches, so for example in Palestine. Robert Eisenman talks about this.
But also in, for example, Ethiopia. Their claim, I think, is through Matthew, that Matthew was the head of the Ethiopian church. And same with Egypt, which was Mark, I believe. And then you have Thomas that goes to the east. So
James Tabor has actually written a whole book about this, yeah?
Right.
So they were the leaders of the church in the first early period.
Yeah.
Then we have Pope Sylvester. There's a really good website about
that's
the
right.
Nazarenes,
Yeah.
Who are the Nazarenes? Now, there's a difference about who they are. Some people say it's a broad group. Some people say it was the Ebionites, but within the Ebionites there's a...
The Ebionites aren't Islamically compatible.
I think there is. There's two types of Ebionites. Those who believed in a virgin birth and those who didn't believe in a virgin birth.
It's not even just that, there are other issues as well. Basically, the Ebionites are not going to be Islamically compatible. There is no known Islamically compatible group.
Why do you think the Ebionites are not compatible?
Because they held... first of all, how we even know about the Ebionites is basically just through the church fathers. And what they write renders them an unacceptable potential candidate for an Islamic group.
I don't think so. They believed in one God.
Denied the virgin birth, for one thing.
Some of them denied the virgin birth, while others...
Okay, so now we're no longer dealing with a heretical group, we're dealing with a heretical group of a heretical group. So again, you're getting smaller.
It's heretical to you.
So
let's say they had, as you probably know about the Ebionites, they claimed to have the original Matthew. The original, it was a singular book called,
right.
I would posit that is Q or the Injil.
Well, it can't be Q. Q is not
Q's
found in
a
Matthew, it's
hypothetical
Mark and
source.
Luke.
It's the same, for those who don't know, it's the same.
No, Q is Mark and Luke that's not found in Matthew, so it's not Matthew.
It's Mark, no, but it's not saying, it's also saying Q is a hypothetical, so for example,
No,
Thomas.
you're confused.
Thomas has got sayings that they potentially could be in Q as well.
No, Q is whatever is not in Matthew, but is in Mark and Luke that is shared between them.
That's in Mark, Matthew. I thought it was Mark, Matthew, Synoptic Gospels as opposed to John's Gospel.
No, it's not.
Okay,
It's in the Synoptic Gospels. You have differences, right? But you also have similarities. And the idea with Q is that it's a hypothetical source to account for things that are in Matthew and Luke, but Mark and Luke were not found in Matthew. Right. Right.
So there was an original Matthew, and so for example, Islamic scholars say through the Israeliyat that there were the 11, what we call the Hawariyin, the disciples. Matthew, the tax collector, is one of them.
Sure.
And it says that he was the one that wrote down the message. I think it's in with Badaya wal Nahaya. So it's actually written down. Matthew.
Where's it written down?
Badaya wal Nahaya. It talks about
What's that?
Matthew, which is Ibn Kathir's stories of the prophets.
Oh, okay. So
it talks about
Israeli.
Matthew was the person who wrote it down, and that came through Jewish scholars, or we call the Israeliyat tradition, which we don't confirm. But for me, it makes the most sense. And I'll tell you why it makes no sense as well. Early church fathers talked about a proto-Matthew. Proto-Matthew. So before the Matthew that we find in the Holy Gospel now, in the Holy Bible now, there was an original Matthew. If that's the case...
let me add a bit to what you're saying.
Good.
Well, technically there is a before Matthew, before Luke, before Mark, because they're written accounts. So there would have been an oral account before the written account. But the thing is, though, is that the written account is not going to vary in total disagreement with the written message, is it? It's going to be the same message. So for example, Matthew, before he writes his account, or the scribes write his account or whatever, the message he's preaching is going to be the same message that eventually he writes.
So let me get this right. Jesus Christ, peace be blessing be upon him, he came down and he preached, and his sayings were written down. Many of them, the Quran talks about what the Injil is. It talks about saying wisdom teachings, the hikmah. It talks about what they are. So it's wisdom.
Yeah, it also quotes from the Gospel of Luke. And it's not just Jesus' words either. It's other things that are being quoted. So we know that the Quran author, when he talks about the Torah and the Injil, he actually understands it as what was present at the time. He's not thinking of some hypothetical Jesus' words only thing. Because if he did, why on earth is he quoting the Injil and the Torah that they had at the time?
Sorry, I lost you.
So the Quran quotes, for example, Luke 1, when it gives biographical accounts about Zechariah.
Yeah.
You know, Zechariah and his wife, they had Yahya, or John as we know him. The same account, roughly speaking, is found in Luke 1, in Surah Al-Miriam, Surah 19, and parts in Surah Imran, Surah 3. So the Quran paraphrases the Gospel accounts. So that is a big indicator about what the Quran author thinks the Gospel accounts are, what the Injil is.
What was originally in the Injil.
Right, so it's funny enough, things that are in there in the 7th century.
And listen, I don't think that everything in the Bible is wrong. I don't think most Muslims will think. I think there's absolutely sound teachings in the
Do you think
Bible.
there's revelation in the Bible?
I think there's revelation in there, yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, like when Jesus says, go to the Father, the Father is greater than I. This is all stuff that is not contradictory.
Could Christians have had salvation before the Quran came?
So, according to Imam Ghazali and a few, and this is the opinion that I follow, there is a difference of opinion. I believe if the pure pristine message before Islam came, before Sayyidina Muhammad came, if that message was corrupted, or it was put in a way that was not acceptable, i.e. there was no one God, and people worked it out and they followed something, I think they'll have an excuse on the Day of Judgment. I think this is the opinion of people time here.
But the problem with that, though, is realistically they have no method of knowing. So, for example, let's say the Gospels are corrupt, right?
Yeah.
Let's say they say things that are just wrong. They elevate Jesus in a way that is not Islamically acceptable, so on and so forth. Because that is their scripture, and it's the scriptures of their forefathers and their forefathers, there's no alternative that they have to be able to correct them and say, actually, no, this is the correct one. Which means that if the Quran, and I think the Quran clearly teaches that they could have salvation before the Quran came, either it's an error or the Quran is actually saying the gospel isn't corrupt.
I would posit the former. I would say that if people have come with the message of Jesus Christ, and let's just say there were a group of people, it was James and so forth, but then there was another group, and let's just say you've grown up in a Trinitarian setting, all you know is churches,
which you would have got from the corrupt gospel.
From the Pauline Gospels, yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's my point.
I agree with that. But let's just say...
But Allah says you find salvation in it.
No, not those Gospels. But I'm saying the original Gospel...
Yeah, but the very verse says you have nothing to stand on unless you adhere to the Torah, the Gospel, and all that has come to you from your Lord.
Yes,
so what Torah and Gospel is it referring to?
The question is, when the Quran is speaking, who is it speaking to?
Well, clearly those who stand on the Torah and the Gospel.
Yes. Who is the Torah? Who are the audience?
Is the Quran for all mankind or just for a small group of people?
I would say it's talking directly. There's certain times within the Quran it's talking directly to a certain group of people, certain Jews, certain Muslims. Then it's a broader thing, all believers. What does I follow, for example, the thing that there was a group of believers, it was an ecumenical movement, and this is Fred Donner's theory, which I'm sure you've read as well.
Muhammad and the believers.
The original Christians, the original Jews, and there was Muslims, and they came and they had a group that they were and they were trying to, and people and the Prophet ﷺ in the Constitution of Medina let people have their own. For example, they had their own courts. The Jews had their courts. The Christians, but which Christians, which Jews? That's the question.
Right. So is the Quran for mankind?
I believe it's for my
Then
hand.
why is it addressing a small heretical group in Arabia?
Because that's the context of the people. But it also condemns.
But I mean,
It does condemn.
Do you understand the
Trinity.
problem
It
though?
does condemn Trinity.
Why is it mentioning the Trinity?
It absolutely condemns Trinity.
Why is it mentioning it though?
Why? Because there were other.
If the
there was
Nasara
other-
and the al-Kitab are not actually Christians and Jews as
No,
we
I don't
understand
think
them,
they were.
then why on earth is it mentioning don't say three? Who's it referring to?
It's referring
Was
to.
the Nasara saying three?
There were groups. So within the Nasara, if you look at the research, the latest research that was done, there was a fragmented group. So you have the Nasara, the Nazarenes, you have the Ebionites, and within the Ebionites they were fragmented. Within the
There is no evidence of Ebionites though. No one thinks it's Ebionites though.
it's potential.
No, there's no evidence. Ahmed al-Jalad is not going to tell you there are
He's not
Ebionites
gonna say,
there.
but,
No one is.
Like, for example, Bert Ehrman says, look, we can't go back to what happened at Jesus' time or
Right.
Sayyidina Muhammad.
But we can go-
What is more likely?
Exactly. Now let's look at the evidence.
Okay.
So the Himyarite kingdom, so south of the Hejaz,
Yeah.
they were owned by Dhul Nuaz, who was a Jewish king.
Yes.
Then they were taken over at some point during the early 6th century by Christians from Ethiopia, the kingdom of Aksum.
Yes.
What did they
Trinitarians.
believe? Trinitarians,
But-
Nicene Creed believing
but
Trinitarians.
You said something that is
There we
so
go.
beautiful that just reminds me. In the Quran, in Surah Baruj, it talks about those Christians that were persecuted by Dhul Nawaz.
It does, yeah.
And what does it call them?
Calls them believers.
Believers.
Yeah.
So, and if you
So
look,
Trinitarians are believers.
If you look at Ibn Ishaq, it talks about.
I mentioned this in my book.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
I'd actually
Yeah.
like to debate you one-on-one.
Yeah, I'd love to,
This is,
yeah.
I'm just walking through the park. I'm just
Sure,
come
yeah,
across
yeah.
you. Listen, whatever you do, you bring questions,
Right.
and I believe I've got the answers.
well,
Unlike
that's
most
good.
people,
Yeah.
we'll have a formal debate. I'll organise it. For most
I like the
people,
fact that you follow scholarship. You've mentioned
I
some
follow
names, and that's really
scholarship.
good.
I'll show you from Ibn Ishaq where the original Torah we have. I give
Oh,
you.
but
names of
Ibn
people.
Ishaq says like the Gospel of John has a prophecy of Muhammad in it.
No.
It does, though.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the historical.
Ibn
bit.
Sa'd does the same. So you look at the early Muslim scholars, they acknowledge the Gospel as what?
We could go to
Fatima
Khalil
Al-Qadjam.
Andani does answer that point.
Khalil Andani.
He answers that John point very well. So,
Okay.
but we'll talk about that. But I think this is. Look, I'm reading through your book.
Sure.
And
Oh,
I
awesome.
respect
Thank you
it. I respect. You know what it is? As Muslims, I'm not going to dismiss something. You read the argument, you understand the argument, you challenge the argument. I think there's some good points in your thing, and I think most Muslims haven't answered your question, to be very frank.
Really?
I don't think that the gospel, if you're going to say that the gospel is the one that you got, oh yeah, it's changed, it's corrupted. I think that the safer point is, and if you go through it, because I go through history, that's what I'm interested in. I'll go through some of the. Gabriel Sayyid has written a book where there was a Mu'tazilite scholar, and he had a debate. His name was Abdul Jabbar. Abdul Jabbar talks about a letter that was found, and it talks about the Nasara version of how Christianity was like. It's fascinating. It's so interesting. And Sholem Klein, who's an brilliant Israeli scholar, he said this is an authentic letter from the 4th century. So we know that there was groups around at that time.
Okay, so all right. Well, if you take that, then you can take the fact that there is a tradition in Islam that Muhammad, not him directly, but his companions, would have written a letter to people like Heracles, the emperor at the time of Byzantium, and you know that he quotes a verse in the Quran where he says, "Let us come to a word common between us." But again, who's he writing to? Trinitarians.
No. And I've read that one. That one is quite.
He also writes
that's heavily
to.
debated.
It's debated about whether or not it's authentic. I don't think it's authentic.
Yeah, I don't think
But
it's
if you,
authentic
all right, if you hold to traditional Islamic view, they would say it is.
So what happened in traditional Islamic? This is look. There's levels.
So
of
it's interesting. Would you say that what I'm saying here and what I think you agree with me on some points, that would be contrary to Sunni and Shia understanding?
I would say what's happened is there's a periodization of history.
Can you answer this point? Would you agree with me that this is against Sunni and Shia?
I would say yes.
Okay.
To answer the question.
So-
and the reason of it, but listen,
Yeah.
within Islam we've always had different levels of Muslims. There's the lay Muslims that
Sure,
read
yeah.
the Quran. They have a basic understanding of everything. Then you have a level higher. Then you have the scholars. Then you have the philosophers
Sure.
who almost didn't engage with the general public.
Sure,
like people
sure,
like
that's-
Ibn Sina. So,
Yeah.
because the concept is too high. So for the lay person, they're gonna, the Christians are wrong.
Okay.
How are they wrong?
So let's do with what we have agreed on, which I think is always good. You might be outside the paradigm of the Sunni and Shia, and you might say, well, without that paradigm, I have answers, which I'm guessing is your point, is your stance.
The historical. I come from a more academic historical.
Sure, okay, that's fair.
Background.
But for those who hold more to the traditional aspect from the Sunni and Shia paradigm, that doesn't have any answers to this, and that's. I don't know how much of Islam is that? 90% maybe?
I can agree to that.
That's interesting.
But we
See, I would actually go further, and I would say even your position, I'd say, is still wrong.
We
but
we'll
have to argue that. But
quite strong. And I think when we sit down, we have both evidences. Let me finish reading your book, and then
Sure.
I will actually organise a formal debate with you.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
I think
you can email me and just to tell me that you're the guy that I spoke to.
Yeah. My name's Hugo, by the way.
Hugo. Nice to meet you.
So basically, what I would say is that there is a lot of stuff in Sunni Islam that is there for the masses. So, for example, we know traditionally that Mecca was full of idols and it was pagan worship.
Right.
We know that's not the case.
I agree with you.
And we know, and this is a very exciting time for education.
I actually really agree with this. In my opinion, this is devastating to the traditional aspects.
It is.
So people like Gabriel Reynolds has published a book about this, and he quotes a lot of Dr. Ahmed Al-Jalad. I always pronounce his name wrong. It's not Haytham. Haytham Sidki. I might be pronouncing your name wrong. I apologise. But this scholarship has shown that when you look at the Hijaz, they were a lot more Christianized, it seems, from the inscriptions than we initially thought. And there seems to be an absence, and it seems to be an absence of pagan inscriptions from the 4th century-ish onwards.
Yeah.
So by the
3rd
time,
century. So Al-Kalbi was a very famous scholar who wrote that of 300 something idols that's around, and the Muslim tradition just went along with it.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Oh yeah. I've read. I haven't read the book, but I know of the book.
Interestingly, he got most of the names of the thing, but where the locations he got all wrong. That's what Ahmed Jalal says as well. But if they've got that wrong, how much more? And this is why
that's powerful what he's saying.
Do you know it doesn't destroy the tradition, as in but you have to listen. We have a duty to the truth. Yeah. Who was Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Who did it come from? Traditional. I don't hold to the view that only Muslims are going to heaven and the rest of the world is going to hell. I don't think that was the way of Sayyidina Muhammad. I believe it was a mercy for mankind. I believe Imam Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah says this. If the message of Islam
interesting people to quote, but all right.
If it hasn't come through to people in a pristine or in the right way, they have an excuse on the day of judgment.
So, I mean, really, the way that I think it's damaging to the tradition is, you look at tafsir and you look at all these scholars that you've mentioned. They're taking this tradition as the lens to which to view the Quran. But when you say, actually, no, there wasn't really this pagan. Then all of a sudden, you've got to go to all these verses in the Quran where traditionally it's been understood as these are the pagans, and you're like, actually, no, they may be Christians and Jews. And then it's like, whoa, that's weird. And it changes a lot, in my opinion.
Well, what is paganism? I believe it was a sect.
And that's what Ahmed Al-Jalal says. He says,
that you get some extreme Muslims, kuffar. Kuffar is the ones who cover the truth.
Can I end this, if you wouldn't mind? I feel like we've reached a good point here. I want to end this. I went on Ahmed Al-Jalal's live stream on Gabriel Reynolds' channel, and I asked him a question as a super chat. I said, Dr. Ahmed Al-Jalal, what is the most controversial aspect of your work? You know what he said? He says it's telling people in Yemen that Arabic doesn't actually originate in Yemen. He says apparently there's a tradition in Yemen that Arabic originates there, and apparently they hold this very proudly. And he actually says no, it was like further north or something.
He studies the Superic Arabic.
Yeah, and apparently that's something he finds. But anyway, that was a really great chat. Thank you very much, and thank you for getting my book. Really appreciate it. Thank you.